A lot of people are very angry that pictures are being released of other people that really had nothing to do with Epstein, but they're in a picture with him because he was at a party, and you ruin the reputation of somebody.
It was supposed to be transparent. Instead, it was staggered. It was supposed to be careful. Instead, it was corrected after the fact. And now the loudest reaction isn't about what's proven. It's about what keeps getting hidden, delayed, or partially shown. All right, folks, let's walk through this carefully. The Justice Department has begun releasing thousands of pages connected to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, records that Congress legally required to be made public. Instead of a single release, we're seeing a rolling disclosure. Documents posted, documents pulled, redactions adjusted, names appearing, disappearing, and reappearing. Over the next few minutes, folks, you're going to see expectations versus reality versus receipts. You'll hear what was promised when this law passed. You'll see what actually happened when the files began to surface. And then you'll hear how the public is reacting, not in one voice, but many. And if you appreciate calm breakdowns that let facts speak, folks, subscribe to Breaking Supporters. Let's start with the expectations. The expectation, folks, was clarity. Congress passed a law requiring the Department of Justice to release Epstein-related records. The president signed it. DOJ officials said the delay was about protecting victims. The public expectation was a complete, careful release, fully compliant with the law and respectful to survivors. No surprises, no partial disclosures, no reputational concerns outweighing transparency. That was the expectation.
Jess Michaels is the lead writer of a new statement from Epstein survivors. The statement raises multiple concerns about the way the release of files has been handled. She explained to CNN that no one from the Justice Department reached out to survivors for their input.
To me, what we're seeing is just an incredibly sloppy and inconsistent and thoughtless process that has been done to try to redact names or leaving things haphazardly unredacted. I felt very strongly that this was a clear-cut, black and white moment. Friday, December 19th at 11:59, if all of the files had not been released publicly, this DOJ had broken the law that took an act of Congress to pass and that the president signed. And to me, that is a point we need to keep talking about.
Folks, this is the reality. The documents came out in stages. Some were removed after publication. At least one victim's name was briefly left unredacted. Internal DOJ emails, never presented publicly or at trial, surfaced years later, showing prosecutors flagging information they did not want to become a surprise down the road. And amid the release, public officials voiced concern not about what the files revealed, but about reputational harm. That contrast is what ignited the reaction. Let's go to the receipts, folks. A January 2020 internal email from an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York states that flight records showed Donald Trump traveled on Epstein's private jet more times than previously reported, at least 8 times between 1993 and 1996. Specific flights are listed. One with only Epstein and Trump. One including a then 20-year-old woman. Others including women prosecutors later identified as potential witnesses. Important context, folks. These documents do not allege criminal wrongdoing. Trump has not been charged in connection with Epstein's crimes. Legal experts emphasize that appearing in investigatory records is not proof of guilt. But these records were not disclosed during the Maxwell trial. They were not public at the time, and they now exist as part of the DOJ's official record. Additional receipts include a 2021 subpoena issued to Mar-a-Lago related to the Maxwell case. Internal DOJ communications discussing charging decisions. Victim objections from 2008 tied to Epstein's Florida non-prosecution agreement. And survivors themselves say they were not consulted before the release. Public reaction, folks, has been intense and highly divided. Many of the most engaged comments focus less on any single name and more on the process itself. One widely upvoted response asks, "Since when did he worry about someone else's reputation?" Reflecting frustration with reputational concerns being emphasized while victims remain unnamed. Another comment with dozens of replies states, "If you're covering up the crimes, then you're involved in the crimes." That sentiment appears repeatedly, aimed not at one person, but at institutions. Others respond with resignation rather than outrage. One highly replied comment reads, "In other news, the sky is blue," suggesting the revelations feel unsurprising to many viewers. Several commenters point to volume rather than conclusions, noting that only a fraction of records have been released so far, with one remark stating, "Only 1% has been released." There are also disputes over fairness. Some argue names are being amplified selectively. Others argue redactions themselves are the problem, saying reputations shouldn't determine disclosure. And many comments return to the same core theme: concern that justice for victims is being overshadowed by concern for powerful people. What's clear, folks, is that the reaction isn't unified. It's fragmented, emotional, skeptical, and still evolving. So let me ask you, folks, what does real transparency look like when records are released in pieces instead of all at once? How should reputational concerns factor into public disclosures involving criminal investigations, if at all? Do partial releases raise more questions than they answer? And what information do you think still hasn't surfaced yet? Drop your thoughts below, folks. Folks, this story isn't over. More documents are still under review. More releases are expected. And scrutiny isn't fading, it's intensifying. No verdicts here. No conclusions handed down. Just expectations, reality, and receipts. Here on Breaking Supporters, folks, we track what people expect and what actually happens.